Alright, so we're in 2022, and even to this day, you cannot pay to win to get that golden cup there. Well, I guess a little bit of FEH grails and the occasional event pack or whatever, but let's figure out what we do with almost 100 grail units, folks. Which ones are the best?
Let the lesson begin.
What's up guys, Akariss here, bringing you another Fire Emblem Heroes video. Man, okay, it's been a while since we've had one of these videos. This is pretty much another Grail tier list or investment type of guide, but there's a couple of things I want to preface this video with before you write angrily in the comments below about why your favorite hero either A, didn't make it to the list, or B, isn't higher up on the list, or why are certain characters up there in the first place. I'm trying to make this list as general as possible, meaning it encompasses every mode in the game. So this would be AR offense, defense, arena, and SDR. So considering all these factors together is how I'm ranking these characters. So I'm trying to keep it as objective as possible, but I'm sure I have a little bit of bias towards something like Asher, who I personally use. Or maybe biased towards characters I have used, such as Kronia, but I'm trying to keep it as objective as possible, and I will showcase some builds, obviously as this video goes on, about characters that I haven't discussed in the past year. So don't expect to see builds on stuff like Reeve or Yenfei or Ignatz or Julius or Walhart, because I made videos within literally this past year that you can go and review, and I still stand behind how those heroes stand in today's game. So I actually want to reflect on some of the older heroes that are actually up here near the top of my list because they are really powerful. Now, if you want to go check out those older videos, it's either weapon refined videos, you'll find playlists and such, and you can definitely go find them on my older videos and where I stand on those particular characters. But at the end of the day, Grails are a currency that's given to you for good performance in Aether Raids, and honestly, there's a lot of choice when it comes to almost 100 characters in the Grail system as to who you should build. So don't feel too overwhelmed. Just what I would suggest is even taking a look at some of my notes below me, and I'll try to explain how I feel about a lot of these characters overall, but also talking about specific modes. So I'm going to section this video into specific modes and where I feel specific characters land as a result of those modes. So in the YouTube kind of chapters, you're going to see the section on Aether Raids, a section on Arena, a section on SDR, and then this tier list is overall. And then near the end of the video, I'm going to go through a couple of builds on where I feel some of these best characters lie. Okay, so before we jump into the meat of this and a lot of discussion to be had, I would implore you to smash the like button, as it does help this video get its reach, and it shows me that you actually care about these type of videos and this information helps you in some manner. So please do that. It's really such a little ask. Alright, I'm going to begin this video by talking about the most important mode, in my opinion, to invest your Grails, Grail heroes into, which is Aether Raids. Okay, so the beginning of this will cover Aether Raids. And why exactly do I feel that's the most important mode to invest into and using the Grails? Well, the thing is, the harder you invest into Aether Raids, the more Grails you get back as a result of that, and then the more things you can expand your investment options into. I've reached about 5,000, 6,000 Grails. I know many people also have, and this is usually a result of either you haven't you've been playing a while, or you just do really well in Aether Raids and you just accumulate a lot of Grails that you can then invest into a lot of characters. So what I want to definitely focus on is why Aether Raids should be your first priority, or at least if you don't know what you're doing, then definitely consider Aether Raids, and then branching out into different modes as a result of good performances or a lot of Grails accumulated into different modes. So Aether Raids, obviously, with that being said, you can see that there is quite a lot of characters here who do really well in Aether Raids, whether that's offense or defense. Something like Innis stands out as being a character who can run a lot of good specials, such as Luna or Ruptured Sky, and get damage piercing, which a lot of characters rely on, such as Fallen Edelgard, or just stuff that might be using Flame or whatnot. And he gets a lot of value out of that. Combining him with something like Bridal Catria and a high investment build makes Innis a unit you really have to respect. And he's an F2P unit, GHB, and that's why he deserves to basically be the best unit on this list. But he's not only good there. So as I said, as I talk into other modes, you'll see why he can still stand out in other stuff. Now, to shock to many, you might see someone like Arden up here and also think, what? But the reality is Arden's actually really good in both Aether Raids offense and defense, and this is because save skills and his weapon are just really powerful. So it's a dual phase weapon that has a guard effect on it, and realistically what he's missing here is just investment. Like, you just need to invest him and support him, and he's got so much bulk that even when he's on a triangle disadvantage against like a magical hitting unit, he still ends up killing many things, and running stuff like Ignis or Bonfire just makes him hit even harder. So I really like Arden, and he can run a lot of flexible builds. He's one of the easier characters to build, and he's just, like, hilariously, I feel underrated even to this day, but considering how good his matchups are, he deserves to be at the top here, whether you use him in offense or defense. Finally, recently released, we have Reeve here. This really doesn't need much introduction, but he stands as a very solid anti-meta unit, but beyond that, he's actually good as a nuker himself. So he has like this Aversa debuff effect. It splashes about a lot of things, and also applies stall on a lot of these units that rely on extra movement, such as Yuri, Legendary Sigurd, even Flying Beasts and whatnot. He's just in a really good spot, and he does deserve to be up at the top for Aether Raids offense for sure. And you don't even need to like necessarily max him out, but he does get a lot of value, and he's not necessarily in the Grail shop yet, but once he is, he's a solid consideration for you to build up. As of this video, he's not here, but if you watch this maybe a few months from now, he likely will be there. Okay, so the best of the best, at least for Aether Raids, do sit in the S tier, but they can be used in other modes as well, such as Arena and SDR, and I do think they get a lot of value there. So if we go on to the A tier and still focus on Aether Raids here, Yanfei acts as a really good carry. The armors such as Ignatz and Black Knight can run good far save or near save combos. And notably, you might ask me why BK is under Arden, but the thing is that BK Black Luna really struggles against units who have damage reduction in some form, especially something like Cyros, who can run Dragon Wall. And this Black Luna ends up getting fairly cut in a lot of damage compared to someone like Arden, who can hit back twice, and with a special will likely kill even through the damage reduction that someone like Cyros might have. It's a big discrepancy there. However, I do appreciate that Black Knight can run speed-based builds and therefore avoid some wind sweep shenanigans. So that would be the big difference between him and BK and Arden, but Arden is bulkier at the end of the day, and with a lot of builds, is just going to fit into most teams better. Now, Eldigan is actually really good as not only an AR offense, but also dominantly a defense unit because of his high defense stat and Mila being really strong there. If we've got like healers and whatnot, or just effects in general that have high res stats, think of Eldigan as like the answer to Mila, and then any other new releases who have like these high res support abilities, like a new Bridal Catcher with like a 50 res stat, would be the counter to someone like Elamine. And she is currently wrecking havoc because there isn't a lot of counterplay to her. But at the end of the day, having that high stat that counters those units is really important. And Eldigan can like define Dark Season himself because of the high defense stat, but he's also really good in Anima, where I actually use him, and he can be used in offense really well as well. So again, super good with how you could end up using characters like this. Yanfei doesn't really need much of an introduction. He kind of just, as I mentioned in the video before, stacking a lot of like speed damage reduction, such as Flame, Null Follow-Up, Null Sea Disrupt. His build flexibilities make him really good, and he's just one of the best F2P units we've ever gone. Built-in distant counter. He's just in a really solid spot as a potential carry, and with the right support can make things work. He's not in the best meta, but he can synergize really well with a lot of stuff, notably something like Elamine, where he doesn't have to deal with Bridal Catcher shenanigans. Okay, so you would see a couple of more recent additions here, such as Ashnard, Julius, and Walhart. Now, Walhart is a great AR defense unit because of his flash effect. Julius ends up being a great carry, especially combined with a near save, because he has damage reduction in his weapon, but he's also very, very tanky from a very extremely high res stat and a great attack stat as well. Plus he has some supportive capabilities through his sabotage attack and res effects. He's really strong, and in a game where, like in a meta where there's not too much dragon effectiveness, he doesn't really have to worry about his biggest problem. Ashnard fits into a great combo combined with Farsafe. I personally use him with Tiki all the time, but I also use him with Ascended Fjorm, and the ability to basically -9 attack, -9 defense your opponents makes Ascended Fjorm a lot more consistent in not only tanking hits that are outside Ice Mirror, but also getting those kills that Fjorm might struggle with. Whereas his combination with Tiki, of course, Tiki also has effectively -9 attack through Divine Mist's effects, and then Ashnard's attack defense rain plus Gurground also does that, so it's like -18 attack when Tiki far saves, which is really good. And they do have color contrasts, which is with Ashnard being red and Tiki being blue, or Ashnard and Fjorm, red and green. So Ashnard ends up being really strong here because he's just a really good partner with a lot of far save units, and I just ended up giving my examples in my experience and have had such easy games because of that. You don't actually want to use him as a distant counter unit, you just want to really stack up his bulk and reduce as much damage as possible when he's tanking melee threats. I've been able to make him tank stuff like Note and Cyros without a problem, despite what you might think that those characters should be able to take out Ashnard, but the reality is they don't when you invest in an Ashnard really high into like really good builds. So anyways, he does need to be up here because he just really is strong in that aspect. Now looking at the B and C tier and anything below that, you have characters who are far more specific in their roles for Aether Raids because they just end up being like fulfilling some sort of specific role as opposed to generally being good in many different places. So for example, in the B and C tier, you're going to have these characters who might fit into some nice Gale Force comps or just are more recent in terms of stats, like Shamir or Kai'Sa. Someone like Marissa just has a really good Gale Force weapon. Kempf has a flash effect on his weapon. Unfortunately, struggles against saves. Someone like Petrine has a really unique weapon hitting res, but also effective against beasts. Connus is a new release, has a great self-accelerating weapon. And then you have like the older save armors such as Felix, Jafar, and Cecilia, who are just falling behind in stats, but fulfill a slightly different role from what Ignatz does because of either their color or because of the weapon. Now, notably here you'll see something like Kronia, who's obviously fallen off, but because of the nature of her very unique weapon and that's still not being replicated in anything else, she actually could fit into many comps or against many teams where they don't properly use healing towers, or she's able to still set up using dancers or supports such as Fallen Takumi, who's actually not shown here, but combining with those ends up enabling her in a way that could work and therefore has to be mentioned here, because if the meta does bring back Vantage strats, maybe due to a seal, then Kronia, or when she does inevitably get a refine, she could end up being really good again. And of course, Bronya being an older carry, higher investment could still work, being one of the ranged units that I still feel is really good in that role. Notably, you have stuff like Guinevere and Micaiah, but unfortunately they are 5-star exclusive, and I'm as a player who's been playing for years, I still don't have the original version of Micaiah. She just never really landed in my barracks, so you do want some alternatives, and Bronya can act as a really easy tank unit because she neutralizes penalties and is acting as a unit that can snipe and tank a lot of stuff. George, in comparison to someone like Ashnard, you might think he might end up being really good, but the problem with George, unfortunately, is he would want to work with something like a near save tank as opposed to Ashnard, who works better with a far save tank. But George's weapon itself doesn't really benefit him, and therefore in his own aspect as a carry or tank, he doesn't really fit in as well as Ashnard does, who effectively gives himself neutralized against bows or reducing enemy defense, which for George doesn't give him his own attack, so he has fallen off because he's just falling behind in stats compared to newer releases. And yeah, so we have refines that could happen soon, which obviously would change, as of this video, could make those characters a lot better, so maybe keep that in mind. Something like Rutger, I believe, deserves a mention, because he's known as being a crit god in his game, and because of that, he could end up with something really nice, like a super slaying weapon, and could make him really strong as a Gale Force unit, or Null Follow-Up, which they kind of default to. Aversa, as an old AR support unit, could make a comeback, for example, and because of that, she needs to be seen here as a potential refine soon. You have those gimmicks down there shown like Fallen Takumi, Solon, Veld, and Yego, because you could invest in them if you actually needed their tomes for specific roles, such as Fallen Takumi combined with Kronia, or let's say Veld for SDR. But again, this part of the video I wanted to focus on Aether Raids. Now, looking at these units overall into the other modes, I wanted to definitely think about such as Arena, where higher statted units definitely end up being pretty solid in the current state. So 2022, the BST increase hasn't happened until CYL like 6, I believe. Like we're far away. We're at least 6, 7, 8 months away from late 2022, where investments such as Ninja Shamir, Kai'Sa, Yanfei, Ignatz, and whatnot all score decently well, and therefore make solid investments at the time of this video to give yourself an edge in Arena. So taking your success or investments in Aether Raids, such as let's say Arden combined with save skills, or Innis on defense, or even on offense, you could use Innis for sure to end up as some PV nuker or just something like that. Taking that success from Aether Raids, accumulating your grails, and then going into Arena and building these other high statted units ends up being pretty solid as a kind of progression or continuation of your account, and should last for quite some while. And yeah, so that's why stuff like Yanfei, Kai'Sa, and Shamir or Ignatz are up here, because they are solid considerations for Arena. And you don't have to go through the gacha to get these units, to merge them up. You don't have to rely on copies or anything. You just need to accumulate those copies through the Grail system over a period of time. And notably, something like Yanfei wouldn't require too much fodder. You wouldn't have to give him something like Distant Counter, since he has Distant Counter in the weapon. A lot of stuff you could pick up from paths or compiling, or you might have been using him in Aether Raids as a carry, and then you can delegate him instead to like Arena once you feel he doesn't perform well in that mode. So that's why the list overall has that feel where you're considering different modes. Now, moving on though, since Arena doesn't really need too much of an explanation, you could end up using dual skills on something like Reeve or Innis, and I still think they would be solid considerations there, or even running like a R Dual Cavalry 4 if you happen to get that, dumping it onto Kempf, and he ends up being like a solid flash or unit that can just help you deal with problem units. But overall, Aether Raids is still going to be what I would suggest as a primary investment for most people, and then going into something like Arena. Now, when we talk about the other most recent competitive mode released, which is SDR, a lot of these units still follow this kind of trend of being really good if they are in Aether Raids in that mode as well. So take SDR and you have someone like Innis who has damage piercing. Of course, it doesn't work against Ice Mirror, but is still really good against a lot of other units who might end up running damage reduction skills or have it in their kit, such as someone like Brave Erica, where Innis could end up just killing her because he just has a really strong nuke and doesn't care about her damage reduction. You'll still see that. Or combined with Bridal Catrio, where he's going to able to at least like double or quad potentially for a lot of things, and that makes him really strong for sure. Reeve, I mean, that doesn't really need an introduction. You pretty much can shut down problem units such as Legendary Sigurd or Yuri and whatnot, depending on how things play out that way. There is definitely counterplay, like the lowest speed check can make it so a lot of Yuri players can avoid that, but it's still going to end up causing some issues for a lot of players. And again, Arden with near save is still going to be really powerful on something like SDR. So the list does consider that, and I did want to mention it, that if you wanted to run someone like, let's say, Walhart in SDR, you won't really have too much issues. You still want certain builds that encompass stuff like trace skills for sure, as Kanto and Trace is still really powerful in something like SDR, but obviously wouldn't be that great for something like Air Defense in contrast. But yeah, guys, so this pretty much covers my thoughts on the different modes and investments on these characters. I've had throughout the past year individual videos that covered a lot of these, such as Reeve, Yenfei, Shamir, Kai'Sa, or recent refines such as Walhart or Julius, and I definitely suggest checking those out if you wanted more info on those particular characters. But what I want to end off this video with is some builds on characters that I haven't talked about in quite a while, starting with Innes below me here. So Innes is really strong because you have to respect him as a nuke on air defense, and because of his damage piercing properties, he's going to end up being really powerful. So slaying with Ruptured Sky and Time's Pulse means that he's pretty much always going to have Ruptured Sky available for usage, give him ARD attack speed with no follow-up, and his high speed and attack stat, and he ends up killing quite a few things. There's definitely other ways you could use him as well. I feel like Guard and Windsweep are also potential different B skills you could use, or even Sturdy Impact, for example. But at the end of the day, on defense, he's a threat that needs to be considered, and in stuff like SDR and Air Offense, he can also be used with AoE builds, or nuker PvE builds, combined with other stuff like Bridal Catcher, where I think he does stand out if you happen to have the right supports. So next up, who I haven't mentioned in a while, is actually Arden. And Arden, he can run different specials such as Bonfire Ignis, depending on whether you have him supported with Lancina or Thor, for example, or you can sub out a Seal with Steady Breath. You can run an A skill such as Sturdy Stance 3, which doesn't work too well with his weapon, but at least it doesn't have the HP condition that his weapon does, so multiple engagements won't hurt him as bad. You could run Unity skills in his A skill. You could run even something as simple as his follow-up ring, which is his preference B skill. Like, the beauty of Arden is actually that he has a lot of build flexibility, and as long as you have near save, you'll pretty much be able to do a lot with him. And I do think his matchups in pretty much every mode are great. So this doesn't matter whether it's offense, defense, Aether Raids Offense, defense. He doesn't score too well for Arena, unfortunately, but hey, maybe we'll get armor dual skills, which, to be honest, wouldn't even hurt at this point. So we could end up getting that, and of course SDR, where he ends up beating a lot of problem units and can even take effective damage to the face, such as from Brave Erica, despite having color disadvantage. So definitely needs a mention here. Eldigan, who now is a little bit older, but still shines as a great potential unit that deserves mention here, because he can run stuff like Curtain's Bonfire, or even Curtain's Ignis if you can accelerate him with Legendary Hector, or Grand Scratcher, which was given for free this month as of this video. And that is a dancer that not only dodges Emila in a lot of cases, but also threatens enemy players who try to sweep your team on defense. And I think a dancer that can threaten the player from trying to do this is really important. So giving him a build that's very offensive, but also works with the stat spread is really great. He's actually a natural great user of Wyvern Flight, despite what you might think with his low speed stat, as long as he's within 10 speed of the enemy unit. So if an enemy has 41 speed, he still actually activates Wyvern Flight and will likely end up just completely reducing the attack and defense discrepancy between him and his opponent for some really great nukes. There's obviously a lot more you can do with him depending on your team or investment you want to give to someone like Eldigan, but he's a great unit and still to this day can be used in different modes. But on defense, building him this way is a great thing to consider. Next up, of course, is Ashnerd, and I'm literally showcasing the build that I run myself, which is a Mirror Stance, Trace, Rain with Quick Riposte and Ruptured Sky. Now, if you ended up formaing Ashnerd, that was probably one of the better Hall of Forms units we've gotten lately. And you might wonder why like an HP or speed IV is important, or even if like why would I pick something like that? But in reality, bumping up his attack and defense, for example, his best stats, can make him a prime suspect for getting hit by stuff like Chill Attack or Chill Defense, and that really does hurt him, as he has no way of really avoiding that without Unity skills. An HP IV is still really good, as it does just give him bulk in both defense and res, and avoids problem buildings such as Panic Manor, depending on the mythics that you combine him with. But yeah, speed as well as an IV I think is a bit underrated on some of these slower units, because if you consider stuff like Peony and Flower of Joy and the speed blessings and whatnot, someone like this can get pretty close to actually equalizing or within being close to damage reduction differences between him and someone like Note. So, and you could even run something with speed, honestly. But Ashnard's greatest strength is reducing attack and defense of the opponent, and this build below in his combat ends up reducing attack and defense of the opponent by 12 by combining Trace, Gurgurant, and Rain. And that is like really good. Finally, I wanted to showcase this because I feel like I never got a chance to, which is what I would consider one of the more scary or very powerful defense builds featuring Petrine, but unfortunately it has that really exclusive Flow Guard fodder. Flow Guard on Petrine pretty much takes away all problems that Petrine has when dealing with enemies, which is making sure that she gets her she pretty much guarantees her follow-up and deny specials. If you wanted the perfect build to deny a fallen Edelgard, you would give Petrine Flow Guard, as this means that the enemy Edelgard cannot bonfire back, and you have effective damage, and Petrine will still end up doubling and 100% end up killing those fallen Edelgards. So that is like a very powerful build. But the thing is, this doesn't need to be necessarily just anti-fallen Edelgard, because a weapon that ends up hitting res with an offensive stat spread like this and some pretty decent bulk actually makes Petrine a threat that is a bit strange for most players to consider. When you actually look at it, even just looking at Ashnard from the previous build, you would see that Ashnard, of course, has a higher defense stat, and he's lowering, attack and defense. So when you consider that Petrine is hitting his lower res stat, which is usually the case on many tanks, then someone like Petrine does stand out quite a bit. And yeah, so that pretty much covers this Grail tier list, rankings, and 2022 updated version. At this point, we're approaching about 100 different Grail units, and obviously I wasn't going to include everyone on this list, and at the end of the day, you can literally just invest into whoever you want, your favorites, and whatever you get the most out of, and a lot of the modes in Fire Emblem Heroes enable this ability. So I would just recommend, invest into who you like, but maybe consider some of these, and I'm sure you might have an easier time depending on where you do use them. So thank you guys for watching. As always, if you enjoyed the video, smash the like button. If you love this content, you want to support what I do, please take a look at the Patreon below. If you want to see some gameplay, Twitch is the place to be, and questions to be asked. Let me know what you think, what Grails you built, what Grail units you built even up till now. Comments below. I'll see you guys in the next one very soon. Much love. Peace.
It's over.